buckle up because what's happening in the transfer market right now, it's not chaos, it's an arms race. Clubs are flinging money around like there's no tomorrow. Everyone's rebuilding. Every manager's planning a revolution. Even Anthony Langius, that Elingest went for a jaw-dropping 60 million euros. It's like inflation infected football overnight. But while the noise has been deafening everywhere else, one club has played it shockingly cool: Manchester City. On the surface, City looked quiet. Their most talked about signing, Tijani Reinders, for 55 million euros, a tidy piece of business, but hardly a blockbuster. Then came the twist. Their third signing, one that barely made headlines, might turn out to be the most dangerous of them all. Rayan Cherki for just 36.5 million euros. That's not just a deal, it's a heist. A transaction that only happened because Lyon were dangling over the edge of financial ruin, on the verge of being demoted due to debt. Make no mistake, if Lyon had money, Cherki would still be untouchable. Be honest, most fans have dismissed Cherki already. They've heard the name for years and assume he's another flashy dribbler who never figured it out, a YouTube baller. More Instagram than influence. Another Ben Arfa, they say. Or the next Naby Fekir, without the goals. But those takes, dead wrong. Cherki has been playing pro football since 2019, and he's still just 21. Last season, 36 goal contributions. Not bad for a player supposedly inconsistent. And while social media was obsessed with 100 million euros transfers, City quietly picked up a player worth 100 million euros at a discount. Cherki is different, truly ambidextrous. Not in the way players claim to be, but in a way that even left Thierry Henry stunned. "I've never seen someone dribble that fast with both feet," Henry once said. And the stats prove it. Last season, 44 total shots, 22 with his left foot, 22 with his right. He doesn't have a weak foot. He's the glitch in the matrix you didn't see coming. Now, let's rewind the tape. Cherki's legend didn't start in a stadium, it started in a parking lot in Lyon when he was just 6 years old. A scout saw him juggling a ball, weaving through older kids, and literally said, "Who is this monster?" From that day forward, he wasn't treated like a prospect, he was treated like a prophecy. Lyon's academy has birthed stars like Ben Lacazette, Martial, Ben Arfa, but Cherki was seen as a level above all of them. At 13, one of his youth coaches called him an extraterrestrial. The only thing that slowed him down was a sudden growth spurt that gave him osteochondritis, sidelining him for nearly a year. But once he healed, it was over for the rest of Europe. Just 33 days after turning 15, Cherki became the youngest player ever in the UEFA Youth League. He scored 5 minutes into his debut, and back in France, he set fire to the Coupe Gambardella, the country's most prestigious youth tournament. A hat-trick in 5 minutes? Rainbow flicks? Nutmegs, fans clapping for him, even when their teams lost. He wasn't just a prodigy, he was a phenomenon. Lyon had no choice but to fast-track him. At 15, he was already playing for the reserves. By summer, rumors were flying. Real Madrid had a handshake agreement. United wanted in. Photos leaked of Cherki wearing a Chelsea shirt. Panic mode. Lyon sprinted to lock him down, even threatening to go to FIFA to block outside influence. They flew him home on a private jet, not from a match, not for a ceremony, but to sign him. That's how desperate Lyon were to keep a 15-year-old Rayan Cherki. The club threw down so much money, so quickly, that even the president had to admit it was an unprecedented investment in football. They had seen enough street magic, enough jaw-dropping moments, to know this kid wasn't normal. But even with the contract in hand, critics still whispered, "Isn't this too soon?" So, to silence the doubt, they sent him back to the UEFA Youth League. A test, a reality check, and Cherki torched it. He didn't just perform, he dominated, scoring in every match, averaging a goal or assist every 59 minutes. He even hit a stoppage time winner to send Lyon into their best ever run in the tournament, and then, they dropped him, cut him from the squad right before the next round. He watched from the stands as Lyon immediately got knocked out. Why? Because the first team was collapsing, winless, hopeless, and stuck in their worst form since 1977. They didn't just want Cherki anymore, they needed him. Still only 16, he made his senior debut that week, and immediately became the youngest player in Lyon's League One history. The club president called him a ray of sunshine on a rainy afternoon, but that was only the beginning. Month later, Champions League debut, the second youngest player ever to appear in the competition. By January, he shattered another record, becoming Lyon's youngest ever goal scorer, beating a mark that stood for 36 years. And then it got tense. One game. That's all it took. One match where he didn't get off the bench, and Cherki walked straight into the office and said, "If you're not going to play me, send me back to the U19s. No filter, no fear, just pure belief in himself." The coaching staff took it as a challenge and decided to start him, thinking the pressure would humble him. Instead, he humiliated them. First minute of the match, dribbled past the keeper, and scored. 8 minutes later, nutmeg, goal, 2-0. Then Nantes pulled one back, so he assisted 2 more, and won a penalty, nearly securing a hat-trick of assists. The match ended 4-3, and Cherki had defenders slipping, sliding, and falling over themselves. A former League One pro commentating the match was literally speechless, admitting, "This kid had better stats in 70 minutes than I managed in 11 years. The next day, the front cover of L'Equipe said it all. Le Cherki Show. Comparisons flooded in. Messi's ill, Ben Arfesso, much hype that Kylian Mbappé himself tweeted, telling the media to chill about his age. But the truth was, they couldn't. By the end of that same season, even with a pandemic shutting down the sport, even with the Champions League compressed into a summer tournament, he was being talked about as Europe's #1 teenage talent. There were whispers of a Euro 2020 call-up. But what Lyon gave him instead was a shot at history, the chance to become the youngest player ever to appear in a Champions League final. They didn't win. Bayern Munich were a wall. But Cherki, he wasn't just Lyon's prodigy anymore. He was Europe's future. He skinned Alphonso Davies like it was nothing, then walked into the post-match interview, cool as ice. And when asked how a kid his age could handle the pressure, Rayan Cherki just smiled and said, "I don't really feel any pressure. It's easy for me." Those would become the words he'd come to regret most, because they weren't true, not entirely. And they marked the beginning of what would soon spiral into Lyon's darkest era, one financial disaster after another, each year worse than the last, dragging the club toward what felt like an inevitable relegation. And as the weight of expectation grew heavier, even Cherki himself would later admit, "At the end of every season, I'd go home, sit with my mom, and just cry. It was only then I could finally let go of the pressure." The worst club owner almost ruined Rayan Cherki. Even with all that noise, his second season started with promise. By mid-year, at just 17 years old, Cherki was out dribbling Neymar, topping League One in successful tech-ons, and he wasn't just dazzling, he started scoring too. Then, 4 games from the end of the season, with Lyon's Champions League hopes on the line, he came off the bench with just 2 minutes left, and buried the game winner against Monaco. Then came 2 assists in the next 2 games. And how did they reward him? They benched him for the final match. Lyon choked without him, and in that moment, the fans stopped seeing him as a teenager. They saw him as the club's savior too early, too much, too fast. And that's when the chaos began. The next season under new coach Peter Bosz, Cherki was left out constantly, even when Lyon's performances tanked. But the belief that he was the answer only grew stronger. And when the club slipped into the bottom half of the table, it was Cherki who got scapegoated. Juninho, a Lyon legend and club director, threw gasoline on the fire, saying he grew up thinking first of himself, second of himself, third of himself, and only then about the team. Just like that, Rayan Cherki was labeled arrogant, selfish, and a problem. But others inside the club, closer to him than any sporting director, called out the hypocrisy. They said his confidence and creativity were being misread, that it was a lazy stereotype, especially about a North African kid from the suburbs. He's no Nasri, no Ben Arfa. He's never late, always working, always focused. In fact, at just 17, he already had his own personal chef, fitness coach, and mental trainer. He was doing everything right, but none of it mattered. Things only got worse when he broke his foot and missed the rest of the season. Even after recovering, Bosz still benched him as if he was being punished. He played over 25 minutes just once under that coach. Despite averaging a goal contribution every 66 minutes, it was madness. Once Laurent Blanc replaced Bosz, everything changed. Cherki was finally freed, and he made them regret every second he'd been ignored. He ended the season like a storm, pulling off a roulette assist for Kakure, then scoring himself in another clutch win over Monaco. They thought that match would send them to Europe. It didn't. But for Cherki, it was proof. Even broken, benched, and blamed, he was still the one they turned to when it mattered most. Even on the French U21 team, he was no longer just a prodigy, he was becoming a leader. He went on a scorching run, 16 goal contributions in 16 matches. Rayan Cherki was on fire, climbing to 13th in the Golden Boy rankings, the highest-rated League One player on the list. His confidence was back, his name buzzing once again in European circles. But just as the world was finally waking up to his brilliance, Lyon fell apart. Again. In came John Textor, an American businessman who bought the club in the middle of the season, promising to lead it alongside the legendary Jean-Michel Aulas, the president who had turned Lyon into a European powerhouse in the 2000s. But within weeks, that fairy tale shattered. Textor accused Aulas of hiding over 400 million euros in debt before the sale, a move that led to a defamation lawsuit and triggered an investigation by the DNCG, French football's financial watchdog. The result? Devastating sanctions. Lyon were forced into a fire sale, offloading almost all their major stars, Barcola, Dembele, Aouar, Malo Gustoch, to keep the lights on. To make matters worse, Textor couldn't even buy new players directly. Every signing had to be routed through other clubs he owned, leading to some downright bizarre maneuvers. One of the most infamous, he signed Ernest Nuama for his Belgian team, RWD Molenbeek, then immediately loaned him to Lyon. It broke Lyon's transfer record, yet technically wasn't their signing. The fee was 8 times larger than anything Molenbeek had ever spent, and still Cherki remained untouchable. Chelsea came knocking, again and again, and Lyon, they refused to answer, but keeping him didn't mean they used him, just for games into the season. Laurent Blanc was sacked, as Lyon Ultras took to the streets furious at a team they felt had tarnished the jersey's legacy. His replacement, Fabio Grosso, but after 7 winless matches, he was out to dot in a move of pure desperation. Lyon turned to Pierre Sage, a coach with no senior managerial experience, whose resume was limited to youth football and a 4th-tier assistant job. But what choice did they have? Lyon were dead last, with 1 win from 14 games, and then miraculously it worked. Under Sage, Lyon won 3 straight matches just as the January transfer window opened. Texter, still under DNCG restrictions, pulled some creative accounting. He sold Lyon's women's team and even their indoor arena to one of his own companies, freeing up enough capital to make 7 new signings. Cherki, he went back to the bench, but he didn't pout. He performed. Even with limited minutes, he averaged a goal contribution every 97 minutes in the second half of the season. In one game, he came on with 24 minutes left, Lyon trailing 2-1. First, he nutmegged the keeper for the equalizer. Then, he whipped in a corner for the winner. But the stats don't even tell the full story. In just 24 minutes, he completed more take-ons and created more chances than any other player had the entire match. From that day on, Sage simply called it the Cherki game. By season's end, Lyon had collected more points in the second half of the campaign than any other team in League One, including PSG, and that magical resurgence, it earned them a spot in the Europa League. The kid they kept benching became the player they couldn't win without. When Lyon clinched a Europa League qualification that had seemed impossible, it was largely thanks to Cherki, who was directly involved in almost every key moment, scoring or assisting in nearly every round. He even provided an assist in the French Cup final. Despite Lyon ultimately losing to PSG at that point, many should have seen the writing on the wall for what was coming next, but they didn't. The following season, dubbed "How Cherki Made His Own CEO Look Stupid," began with Fulham making shockingly low offers, starting at just £12 million. Soon after, PSG and Dortmund raised the stakes with bigger bids. Then, a scandal broke. Leaked texts revealed club owner John Textor calling Cherki a little prick before correcting himself and admitting, he's a good kid. It's his teammates who are the pricks. Ironically, Cherki's own mother and brother manage him. Highlighting how tangled things had become, the drama took a toll. Cherki essentially went on strike, training separately from the team until match day 5. But when he finally returned, he looked as hungry and sharp as ever. In just 7 minutes on the pitch during his comeback game, he scored. 4 days later, he netted another goal, and a week after that, he delivered 2 assists. Remarkably, at that stage, Cherki was still finding his rhythm by December. He was firing on all cylinders, opening with a goal and assist against Angers. In the next game, against Eintracht Frankfurt, he either scored or assisted every one of Lyon's 3 goals, sealing a crucial win. Later that same week, he added an assist against PSG. By then, Cherki had already matched his career best of 12 goal contributions for the season, but what stood out most was how much he had matured. Gone were the flashy tricks and flicks. At 21, Cherki was now a cerebral player reading the game with precision, simplifying complex situations, positioning himself perfectly, and orchestrating Lyon's transitions. He even became a vital defensive contributor, something rarely expected from an attacker so young. His rapid growth was astonishing. The second half of the season saw him elevate his game even further. Without missing a single match, Cherki began February with an assist against Marseille, followed by a goal and 2 assists a few days later. Then came another assist against Montpellier, and a goal against PSG the following week. He recorded 2 assists in a 2-1 victory, and then scored despite coming on with just 30 minutes left on the clock. Right in the middle of all this, during a Europa League last 16 tie against FCSB Bucharest, Cherki completely dominated, assisting 4 goals across both legs, 2 at home, 2 away. He ended up with an incredible tally of 3 goals and 10 assists in just 8 consecutive matches, pushing his Europa League stats into double digits. Then came the iconic moment against Manchester United. In the first leg, he appeared with just 30 seconds left and chipped a goal over the keeper to tie the game. In the second leg, in extra time with Lyon down to 10 men, and the aggregate score tied for 2-4, Cherki seized a loose ball and fired it into the net before the keeper could react. He celebrated defiantly, grabbing his shorts and staring down the United fans as Lyon suddenly led by 2 goals just 7 minutes from matching their best ever European run. But football can be cruel. One of the greatest comebacks in history unfolded, erasing Lyon's hopes. Still, Cherki finished the Europa League with 12 goal contributions and 12 matches, a record no one else came close to. For context, he had almost twice as many assists as the next best player. In fact, this was an all-time record. There was no doubt Cherki was the undisputed young Player of the Year, and an automatic selection in the Team of the Season. On top of that, he was named Dribbler of the Year, and topped the assist charts across Europe's top 5 leagues. His expected assists per 90 minutes were unmatched. Simply put, Cherki was the most creative player in Europe. However, off the field, Lyon's financial problems worsened. The DNCG, French football's financial watchdog, uncovered Textor's shady dealings and forced him to sell the club temporarily. Lyon was technically relegated and forced to sell Inter Pep Guardiola, who quickly snapped up the Prodigy. National team debut was dramatic, coming on with 27 minutes left as France trailed 5-1 against Spain. But even in a lost cause, he stole the show with jaw-dropping passes. One of his assists was voted goal of the tournament, and for one night, he looked like the best player on the planet, nearly inspiring an impossible comeback. Before the football world could catch its breath, Cherki was officially locked in at Manchester City. After shining at the Club World Cup and closing his season with 36 goal contributions in just 3,200 minutes, the hype is real. With a lethal striker like Erling Haaland ahead of him, maybe Cherki's bold claim that he's here to win the Ballon d'Or isn't so far-fetched after all.